With the spoken word, he created the heavens and the earth. And God himself, God the Word, who was with God and was God, became flesh and dwelt among us. One of his names is God the Word. So when God speaks a word, it creates things. When he speaks a vow, it creates an unbreakable covenant. Now, God has to condescend to do this, because you understand God has all the options. God can create ex nihilo, meaning out of nothing. Whatever he wants, he speaks it into existence. So for God to limit his options and make a promise to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to you and to me, is doing something he is under no obligation to do whatsoever. And yet God says, because he wants to, he chooses to make a covenant and bind himself with an oath to Abraham and make certain promises to him. And when God does that, it's not a light and trivial thing, because God is a covenant-keeping God. What an awesome thing when people become more like God. God's people should be a covenant-keeping people, an oath-keeping people. Jesus cautions us in the Sermon on the Mount against making rash vows and oaths. In fact, he says, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by the hairs of your head. You cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything more than these cometh of the evil one. Now that doesn't actually forbid covenants in marriage and swearing vows and oaths in courts of law, somber, serious places. It doesn't actually forbid that. But what had happened was people had in Jesus' generation, had so watered down the value of their word that they had to make a vow and an oath for everything to get anybody to even begin to believe them. So they would swear by all kinds of things. I swear by the gold of the temple. I swear by the hair of my head. I swear by heaven's throne. And Jesus basically says, listen, when you swear by heaven, you're swearing by God's throne. If you swear by the earth, you're swearing by his footstool. God is taking an account of all your words, even your yes and your no. So don't devalue your yes and no by swearing casually all the time. When I was a child, I was told, when kids would regularly say, I swear, and people would say, I swear to God. A lot of times that's how you know they're lying, is if they swear to God. And they say these silly little things. Children, don't ever say this. This is serious. They'd say things like, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. That's what you call a maledictory oath. We're going to see one here. But it was light and it was trivial and it was said for everything. And I was taught as a child, it's like, no, you don't need to promise. You don't have to say, I promise for everything. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Sometimes my children would, I'd tell them something and they'd say, do you promise? It's like, no, I don't need to promise. We're going to do that. God wants his people to be a promise-keeping, covenant-keeping people that even our yes and our no has value. So that when you shake your hand, when you say something, the paperwork of a contract is useful because it helps you to make clear exactly what the terms are. Right? It's exactly, this is what I intend to do, because sometimes people forget, circumstances change, and if you have something to refer to and it's written down, you have an exactitude that you can hold yourself to in the other person. But really, the honor of a Christian should be enough. The yes and the no should be enough. Psalm 15 praises the godly man who swears to his own hurt and does not change. That means he makes a commitment that hurts him rather than helps him. But he agrees to complete the task even at a profit loss because he gave his word on it. That's how God wants us to be, because that's God's character. God will make a promise and he'll keep it to the point of being nailed between two thieves. That's what God will do. And God wants us to be like him in this. He wants us to be a covenant-keeping people. And when a people move away from love thy neighbor as thyself, when they move away from covenant-keeping, what do you see? You see more locks on the doors. You see the destruction of personal and private property. You see more and more laws, more and more police, more and more lawyers, more and more taxes, bigger and bigger government. Somebody ought to pass a law to do something about that. Why? Because man is lawless, because there is no king and every man does what is right in his own eyes. Meaning God is not king. Well, God wants his people to be self-governing. Self-governing. And he wants us to keep our word, because that's the type of God he is. He is a covenant-keeping God.